You're my biggest embarrassment. I wish I had my mother-in-law as a mother. Those words came from my own daughter's mouth, in front of the whole family, at Christmas Eve dinner. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Dolores Clark. I'm 68 years old and I live in a 2-story brownstone in Park Slope, Brooklyn. I inherited this house from my parents over 40 years ago, back when the neighborhood wasn't what it is today. Now it's worth more than they ever could have imagined. But to me, it's still the place where I raised my daughter, Patricia, where I cared for my husband during his illness, and where I've cried in silence more nights than I can count. That December night, like every year since I was widowed 5 years ago, I had prepared Christmas dinner with my own 2 hands. My fingers, already twisted by arthritis, had been working since 5 in the morning, preparing a slow-roasted brisket and all the sides from scratch. The smell of herbs and roasted meat filled the whole kitchen. I had set the table with the hand-embroidered tablecloth my mother gave me when I got married, lit the votive candles in honor of my late husband Robert, and placed the nativity scene that he carved himself, a new piece every year. Patricia arrived at 9 o'clock, an hour and a half late, as usual. She was on the arm of her husband Frank, a man who worked for some big firm on Wall Street and who has always looked at me as if I were part of the house's old furniture. Behind them walked Carol, Frank's mother, an elegant 65-year-old woman, always dressed in expensive clothes, who never missed an opportunity to remind me that she lived on the Upper East Side and had studied abroad. "Sorry we're late, Mom," Patricia said without looking me in the eye, taking off a black coat that I knew cost more than my grocery budget for 3 months. "We went to Frank's mom's place first." Of course, it was always Carol's house, first. I was the mandatory dessert, the Christmas obligation to be fulfilled before going home to bed. I invited them to sit down. Patricia settled into the chair that had been her father's. Frank sat to my right without greeting me, and Carol took the seat of honor, the one Robert had always occupied during family dinners. I stayed in the kitchen, serving the plates like the hired help I had apparently become in my own home. "Smells delicious, Mrs. Clark," Frank said with that fake smile he had perfected over the 10 years he'd been married to my daughter. It was the same tone he used when he asked me to babysit my granddaughter on weekends because they had important social commitments. I returned to the dining room with plates of brisket, the rice pudding I had made especially because I knew it was Patricia's favorite dessert since she was a child, and the drinks. I sat at my own table feeling like a stranger, listening to them talk about their vacation in the Hamptons, the new house they were buying in Scarsdale, and the plans to send my granddaughter Sophia to a private bilingual school. "And where's Sophia?" I asked with a trembling voice, daring to interrupt their conversation. I was really looking forward to seeing her. I bought her a present. A silence fell over the table like a slab of marble. Patricia exchanged an uncomfortable look with her husband. Carol took a sip of her red wine and sighed with that expression of superiority I knew so well. "Sophia is at a friend's sleepover," Patricia finally replied, cutting her brisket with mechanical movements. "We thought it would be for the best." For the best? Why would it be for the best for my granddaughter not to spend Christmas Eve with her grandmother?" Carol placed her fork on the plate with a metallic clink that echoed through the dining room. Her eyes locked on mine with that cold stare that always made me feel like something to be tolerated out of politeness. "Look, Dolores," she began in that slow, deliberate voice she used when explaining something to someone she considered intellectually inferior. "The girl is at a very important age. She's forming her personality, her tastes, her manners. We believe it's essential for her to be surrounded by environments that will help her develop properly." I felt as if I had been slapped. "What do you mean by that?" "What Carol means," Frank interjected, backing up his mother as he always did, "is that Sophia needs positive role models, examples of how to behave in society, how to speak correctly, how to present oneself." Patricia continued to eat in silence, her head down, as if this conversation had nothing to do with her, as if they weren't talking about her own mother. "But I'm her grandmother," I insisted, feeling my voice break. "I've taken care of her since she was born. I've taken her to the park. I've taught her to bake cookies. I read her stories. Exactly, Carol said, dabbing her lips with a napkin, as if she had just pronounced the most obvious word in the world. You teach her things from, well, another era. You speak with slang that's no longer used. You dress her in clothes from thrift stores. You don't understand that there are more appropriate ways of doing things. The air grew thick. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock that had belonged to my parents, the only sound in a dining room that had suddenly turned into a courtroom where I was the defendant, accused of a crime I didn't understand. Patricia lifted her head for the first time all night. Her eyes, which had been my greatest pride when she was a child, now looked at me with something I took a few seconds to recognize. Shame. She was ashamed of me. Mom, she said in a voice that sounded tired, as if she had been rehearsing this moment for months. You're my biggest embarrassment. I wish I'd had my mother-in-law as a mother. At least she knows how to act in public. You're from another time. You don't get how the world works now. The words fell on me like shattered glass, each syllable cutting me inside in a way I had never experienced. Not even when Robert died in my arms had I felt a pain so sharp, so absolute, so final. I remained motionless, my fork suspended in the air, looking at this 35-year-old woman who had come from my womb, who had nursed at my breasts, who had cried in my arms during feverish nights, who had taken her first steps towards my outstretched hands. The silence spread across the table like an oil slick. Frank stared uncomfortably at his plate. Carol smiled with satisfaction, as if someone had finally said what she'd been thinking for years. And Patricia kept looking at me with that expression of annoyance, as if I were a problem that had gone unresolved for too long. "Excuse me," I whispered, getting up from the table on trembling legs. "I'm going to the restroom." I walked down the hall, feeling their eyes fixed on my hunched back, hearing how they immediately resumed their conversation as if nothing had happened, as if I were just a bothersome interruption to their perfect evening. I locked myself in the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The reflection that stared back was that of a woman I no longer recognized. Gray hair badly cut because I couldn't afford a decent salon, deep wrinkles around my eyes, rough and stained hands from years of domestic work. When had I become invisible? When had I stopped mattering? Laughter came from the dining room. Laughter that didn't include me. Conversations that flowed better without my presence. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, the same one where I had bathed Patricia as a baby, where I had comforted her when she cried from nightmares, where I had spent entire nights when she had a fever. The memories came like an avalanche I couldn't stop. Patricia was 8 when Robert lost his job at the textile factory in Jersey. Those were terrible months, watching him leave every morning to look for work and return every evening with his face more sunken, more defeated. I was cleaning houses in Greenwich, Connecticut, taking 2 buses and a train to get there, carrying my bucket of cleaning supplies that I bought with the money I scraped together, selling baked goods at the local flea market on weekends. Patricia never knew that during those months, I ate only once a day so she could have her glass of milk before bed. She never knew that I sold my wedding ring, the only valuable object I owned, to pay for her class trip to Washington, D.C. Because she was the only kid in her class who hadn't turned in the money. Robert never found out. I told him I'd found the money saved in a tin can. When Patricia was 15 and wanted to go to her high school's formal dance, I worked double shifts for 2 months cleaning offices downtown. I would get home at 2 in the morning, my hands swollen and my back aching, but I managed to save enough money to buy her the pink dress she'd seen in a boutique in Soho. It was the most expensive one in the store, but her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen before when she tried it on. "Mom, I look like a princess," she had shouted, hugging me so tightly that for a moment, all the double shifts were worth it. That night, when she came home radiant, telling me every detail of the party, how all the boys had asked her to dance, how her friends envied her dress, I stayed up all night watching her sleep, thinking that every sacrifice was worth it if my daughter was happy. But the sacrifices didn't end there. They never ended. When Patricia decided to study business administration at a private university, I sold the vintage Singer sewing machine I had inherited from my mother. It was the last valuable thing I had left. The machine I had used to make clothes for Patricia when she was a little girl. The one I used to do alterations for extra cash. I sold it for half its worth because I needed the money quickly for tuition. Robert was sick by then. The lung cancer kept him in bed most of the time, and the medical expenses ate up all his retirement savings. I was still cleaning houses, but now I also cared for Robert at night, gave him his medicine, and took him to chemo appointments on the subway because we couldn't afford taxis. Patricia went to university as if everything was normal, as if the tuition paid itself, as if the textbooks appeared by magic, as if her spending money fell from the sky. She never asked where the money came from. She never offered to get a part-time job. She never suggested transferring to a cheaper public university. For those 4 years, I worked in 3 different houses. There was Mrs. Restrepo on the Upper East Side, who paid well but treated me like I was invisible, giving orders without looking at me. There was Ms. Morales in a Scarsdale mansion, who inspected my work with a magnifying glass and would dock my pay for the smallest mistake. And the Guerrero family in a wealthy part of Long Island, where I cleaned a 3-story house by myself, lugging a vacuum cleaner up and down stairs until my knees ached so much I would cry on the train ride home. Patricia graduated with honors. That day, watching her receive her diploma in an elegant ceremony that Robert and I attended in the best clothes we owned, I felt it had all been worth it. My daughter had a degree. My daughter had a future. My daughter had achieved what I never could. Robert died 6 months after her graduation. Patricia already had a job at a consulting firm, had already met Frank at an alumni event, and was already building the life I had dreamed for her. During the wake, while I wept over my husband's casket, Patricia was in a corner of the funeral home, on the phone, organizing the details of her first vacation with Frank to the Hamptons. I remember hearing her say, "No, honey, it's just one more day. We'll be free to go on Wednesday. Just one more day." Her father's funeral was just one more day. After the funeral, Patricia moved in with Frank. I was left alone in the house, surrounded by memories and medical bills that took me 2 years to finally pay off. I kept working, even though I was over 60 and my body ached constantly. Patricia would visit occasionally, always in a hurry, always with her phone in her hand, always reminding me of the things I did wrong. "Mom, you can't keep dressing like that if you're going out with me. Mom, don't talk so loud when we're at the restaurant. Mom, it's better if you don't come to my friend's wedding. You don't know anyone and you'll feel uncomfortable." Each comment was like a small stab, but I endured them because I thought it was a natural part of life. Children grow up, form their own families, become a little embarrassed by their parents. It was normal, I told myself. When Sophia was born, I thought everything would change. I thought being a grandmother would give me a place in Patricia's life again, and for the first few years it did. Patricia needed me to watch the baby while she worked, to keep Sophia on weekends when they went out, to help when the child got sick. I was useful again. I had a purpose. But as Sophia grew and they had more money, my help became less necessary. They hired a nanny. They enrolled Sophia in expensive extracurricular classes. They moved to a bigger house in a more exclusive suburb. And I went back to being a nuisance. The visits became more sporadic. Sunday family dinners turned into occasional get-togethers. Phone calls were reduced to mandatory social obligations, birthdays, Mother's Day, Christmas. And now this, the confirmation of what I had suspected for years, that my daughter was ashamed of me, that everything I had done, all the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, all the humiliating jobs, a whole life dedicated to giving her the best, had been reduced to a sentence that cut me like a knife. "You're my biggest embarrassment." I got up from the edge of the tub and looked at myself in the mirror again. This time, I saw something different. I saw a woman who had given everything and received nothing in return. I saw a mother who had raised an ungrateful daughter. I saw a person who had forgotten her own worth in the process of overvaluing others. From the dining room came the sound of plates being cleared. I heard Carol's voice. "We should get going. We have an early breakfast with my sisters tomorrow." Patricia replied, "Yeah, we should go. We've done our duty here. We've done our duty here." As if visiting me were an obligation to be checked off a Christmas to-do list. I opened the bathroom door and walked to the living room, where they were already putting on their coats. Patricia avoided my gaze. Frank was checking his phone, and Carol was adjusting her cashmere scarf with elegant movements. Thanks for dinner, Mrs. Clark, Frank said without sincerity. It was very nice. Yeah, Mom. Thanks, Patricia muttered, giving me a kiss on the cheek that felt like the brush of a newspaper. We'll call you tomorrow. I knew they wouldn't call. I knew weeks would go by before I heard from them again. I knew that if I didn't take the initiative, they could forget I existed. I walked them to the door and watched them drive away in Frank's silver BMW. Patricia didn't look back once. Carol got into the car with the grace of someone who had just won a battle she'd been fighting for years. I closed the door and stood in the hallway of my house, listening to the echo of my own footsteps in a space that suddenly felt too big and too empty. That night, for the first time in many years, I didn't clear the dinner plates. I left them on the table as evidence of what had happened, as a reminder that something had changed forever that Christmas Eve. I went to bed with Patricia's words echoing in my head. You're my biggest embarrassment. But for the first time, I began to wonder, who should really be embarrassed here? I woke up at 5 in the morning on the day after Christmas with a pain in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart. It was the kind of pain that pierces your soul and leaves you breathless, as if someone had been squeezing your throat all night. The dining room table was just as I had left it. Dirty plates, crumpled napkins, glasses with dregs of wine. But what hurt the most was seeing my empty place. The chair where I had sat to listen as my own daughter reduced me to nothing in front of strangers. As I washed the dishes, every object reminded me of something. The plate where I had served the brisket Patricia barely touched. The glass where Carol had sipped my wine while explaining why I wasn't a suitable influence for my granddaughter. The fork Patricia had used to cut her food while uttering the words that had shattered me. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of weak coffee, because I no longer bought the good kind, and started to remember things I had preferred to forget. Small gestures, comments, attitudes that for years I had justified as a natural part of a child growing up. Like that time, 3 years ago, when Patricia took me to see the offices where she worked. I had put on my best dress, a navy blue one I'd bought on clearance at Macy's, and had my hair done at a cheap salon to look presentable. I was so proud to see where my daughter worked, to see how important she had become. Throughout the tour, Patricia walked 2 steps ahead of me, as if we weren't together. When she introduced me to her colleagues, she would always add, "She's very old-fashioned, from a different generation," as if she had to apologize for me before I even opened my mouth. I remember one of her bosses, an older, kind-looking man, asked me what I did for a living. Before I could answer, Patricia jumped in. "Oh, my mom's a homemaker. That's what she's done her whole life." She didn't mention I'd worked cleaning houses to pay for her college. She didn't say I'd sacrificed everything so she could have opportunities I never had. Just a homemaker, as if it were something to be ashamed of. Or like last year, when they invited me to Sophia's birthday party. It was a fancy affair at an event hall in Scarsdale, with professional clowns, a candy bar that looked like it was out of a magazine, and children dressed for a gala. I arrived with the gift I'd bought downtown. A rag doll I'd seen at a market stall that reminded me of the ones my mother used to make for me. Patricia opened the gift in front of all the guests, children from wealthy families with imported toys and electronic gadgets. When she saw my doll, she gave that forced smile I knew so well and said, "How original, Mom. Thank you." Then she discreetly placed it under the table, behind other flashier gifts. Sophia, who was 6 at the time, picked up the doll and said, "I like it, Grandma. Can you show me how to do her hair?" But Patricia quickly distracted her. "Why don't you come see your other presents, honey? Look what Daniela's parents got you." That day, throughout the whole party, I sat at a table in the back with other grandmothers who also looked out of place. As I watched Patricia mingle with the other parents, talking about private schools and trips abroad, I realized I was an obstacle in her perfect life. But there was something else that morning, washing dishes in my silent kitchen, that I finally dared to acknowledge. For a long time, my daughter hadn't just been ashamed of me, she had been using me. The week before Christmas, Patricia had called me, which was unusual since we usually communicated through texts that she answered with one-word replies. Her voice sounded sweet, like when she was a little girl and wanted something special. "Mom, how are you? Are you feeling okay?" I was thrilled to hear genuine interest in her voice. "Yes, honey, I'm fine. Is everything all right over there?" "Yes, everything's perfect. Hey, Mom, I wanted to ask you something. Do you know where all the papers for the house are? You know, the deed, important documents? Why are you asking, Patricia? Oh, nothing serious. It's just that Frank and I are looking into some investment stuff, and our accountant said it would be good to know exactly what properties are in the family. For tax purposes, you know? I didn't understand, but I said yes because I've always hated looking ignorant in front of my daughter and her world of complicated terms. Do you know if Dad left any other documents? Anything you haven't looked at? Well, yes, dear. Your father left a box of papers I've never opened. It's in the bedroom closet. He told me to only open it if I ever really needed something important. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Patricia said, in that voice she used when trying to sound casual, "Oh, Mom, it's probably just old papers. But since we're on the subject, don't you think it would be a good idea for me to look through them? Since I have a business degree, I understand that stuff better. We wouldn't want you to miss something important." At that moment, something inside me stirred uncomfortably, but I ignored it. "If you think it's necessary..." "Perfect, Mom. I'll come by on Saturday and we can go through everything together. It's better to be sure everything's in order." But on Saturday, Patricia never showed up. She sent a text. "Sorry, Mom. Something came up. We'll do it after New Year's." Now, remembering that conversation as I finished washing the dishes from the most painful dinner of my life, I understood something that chilled my blood. Patricia hadn't come to dinner out of love or holiday tradition. She had come because she needed something from me, and when she realized I wasn't important enough to pretend to respect in front of her mother-in-law, she simply let me be humiliated. How many times had she visited only when she needed something? How many times had she called me Mom with affection only when she required a favor? I got up from the kitchen table and walked to the bedroom I had shared with Robert. The closet still smelled faintly of his aftershave, a cheap brand he bought at the corner drugstore, but that for me had always been the scent of home. In the back of the closet, under old blankets and winter clothes I no longer wore, was the wooden box Robert had made with his own hands during the final months of his illness. It was a simple box, varnished pine, with a small golden lock he had installed with the care of someone who knew he was creating something important. I pulled it out with trembling hands. It was heavier than I remembered. Robert had given me the key the day before he died, when he could barely speak through the oxygen mask. "Dolores," he had rasped, "in this box is everything you need to know. Only open it when you feel like you can't go on anymore, when you feel like everyone has forgotten you. In there, you'll find who you really are." I had never understood what he meant. Robert had always been a man of few words, who expressed his love through actions rather than romantic phrases. He built this house with his own hands, brick by brick, working weekends for 5 years until we had a home of our own. He never gave me expensive jewelry, but he brought me flowers from the market every Friday, without fail, for 25 years of marriage. I placed the box on the bed and stared at it for a long time. Patricia's words still echoed in my head. "You're my biggest embarrassment." But now I also heard Robert's words. "When you feel like everyone has forgotten you." How had Robert known this moment would come? I found the key in the jewelry box where I had kept it for 5 years. My hands were shaking so much it took several tries to get the lock open. When the lid finally lifted, the smell of old paper and Robert's cologne hit me like a wave of memories. Inside were envelopes, folded documents, and a letter with my name written in Robert's careful hand. But the first thing that caught my eye was a thick manila envelope that read, "For Patricia, only if she deserves it." With trembling hands, I took out the first document. It was a deed, but not for this house, as I had thought all these years. It was for an apartment in the West Village that I never knew Robert had bought. I pulled out another document, another deed, a commercial property in Soho that was being leased and generating monthly income, and another, a bank account with my name as the sole beneficiary, with an amount that took my breath away, $2.8 million. Robert had been saving and investing for all the years he worked at the factory. Secretly, without my knowledge, he had been building a nest egg to secure my future. With tears streaming down my cheeks, I picked up the letter with my name on it. Robert's handwriting, though shaky from his illness, was clear. "My dearest Dolores, if you're reading this, it's because you need to remember who you are. You are the strongest woman I have ever known. You are the mother who sacrificed everything for a daughter who may not deserve it. You are the wife who cared for me until my last breath without ever complaining. In this box is everything I worked to leave for you. Don't tell Patricia yet. First, make sure she treats you with the respect you deserve. Only if she proves she can love you unconditionally should you share this with her. But if she ever treats you like you're nothing, if she ever makes you feel like a burden, then remember, you are worth more than anyone tells you, including our daughter. You have the power to decide who deserves to be in your life. Use it. I collapsed onto the bed, clutching the letter to my chest. Robert had known. Somehow, he had foreseen that Patricia might become the cold, calculating woman who had dined at my table the night before, and he had given me the tools to defend myself. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman with options, and Patricia had no idea what she had just awakened. I spent 3 whole days without leaving the house, reading and rereading every document Robert had left in that box. 3 days in which my phone rang exactly 0 times. Not from Patricia, not from Frank, not even a text message asking how I was after that disastrous Christmas dinner. My daughter's silence hurt, but it no longer surprised me. It was confirmation that I only existed in her life when she needed something. On the 4th day, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went for a walk through my neighborhood with no particular destination, just for the pleasure of it. I put on my best blouse, the one I saved for special occasions that never came, and walked the streets of Park Slope as if seeing them for the first time. It was strange to see my neighborhood with new eyes. The brownstones I had watched deteriorate over decades now showed signs of meticulous renovation. Cafes with English names had replaced the corner bodegas where I shopped when Patricia was a child. Young people with laptops occupied tables on patios where there used to be auto repair shops. My house, which I had always seen as modest, I now understood was located in a highly coveted area. Robert had known this long before I did. That's why he had bought the apartment in the West Village, why he had invested in the Soho property. My husband, who I thought only knew about textile machines, had turned out to be a visionary. When I returned home, I found Patricia waiting for me on the stoop, leaning against her BMW with an expression of annoyance I knew very well. She was wearing a designer tracksuit that probably cost more than my food budget for 2 months, and she had her phone pressed to her ear. "No, honey, I'm just here waiting for my mom to show up. I don't know where she could have gone," she was saying in that exasperated voice she used whenever I inconvenienced her. Seeing me, she cut the call abruptly. "Mom, where have you been? I've been waiting here for half an hour." "I went for a walk," I replied, calmly taking out my keys. "Did you need something?" The question took her by surprise. Usually, when Patricia showed up unannounced, I would fuss over her, offer her food, coffee, ask her how she was, how work was going, if she needed me to watch Sophia. "Well, yes, we need to talk. Can we go inside?" I opened the door and we went in. Patricia walked straight to the living room as if it were her own house, sat on the main sofa, and waited for me to serve her water, as I always did. But this time, I sat down across from her and waited. "Aren't you going to offer me anything?" she asked after an awkward silence. "Do you want something?" "Well, yes. A glass of water would be nice." "The kitchen's over there," I said without moving. "You know where everything is." Patricia looked at me as if I'd spoken a foreign language. For 35 years, I had rushed to serve her everything she needed without her having to ask. This new attitude was clearly disconcerting. She got up with an exaggerated sigh and went to get her own water. When she returned, she sat down with the tense posture of someone trying to keep their cool. "Mom, I came to apologize for Christmas Eve. Things really got out of hand." "They got out of hand?" "Yes, well, Carol sometimes says things without thinking. And I was a little stressed with work, the holidays. You know how it is." I waited for her to continue, but Patricia seemed to think that was a sufficient apology. When she saw I wasn't responding, she added, "The point is, I don't want this to affect our relationship. We're family, right? And family forgives." "What exactly are you forgiving, Patricia?" "What? You said family forgives. What are you forgiving me for?" "No, Mom, that's not what I meant. I'm asking you to forgive me. For what exactly? Patricia began to show signs of irritation. Her hands fidgeted, and she had the expression she got when things didn't go her way. For letting Carol say those things. For not defending you like I should have. And what about what you said? Silence. Patricia took a sip of water and avoided my gaze. Patricia? What about the words you said? Mom, I already told you I was stressed. You said I was your biggest embarrassment. You said you wished you had your mother-in-law as a mother. It was said in the heat of the moment. The heat of what moment? We were having a quiet dinner in my home. I hadn't done anything to you. What heat of the moment? Patricia stood up from the sofa, clearly frustrated that the conversation wasn't following the script she had planned. Look, Mom, I came to fix things. But if you're going to be like this, maybe we should talk another time. Be like what? Ask you why you humiliated me in my own house? I didn't humiliate you. I just told the truth. Sometimes you're a little difficult to take to certain places. And there it was. The truth behind the fake apology. Patricia hadn't come to admit she'd done something terrible. She'd come to confirm that I was, in fact, a problem to be managed. I see, I said, rising from my chair. Do you know why you really came, Patricia? I came to fix things with you. No, you came because you need something, as always. What are you talking about? About your father's papers. About the box you asked me about last week. Patricia's expression changed instantly. The mask of the repentant daughter fell away, revealing the calculating woman she truly was. Well, yes, we need to look at that too. It's important that we have all the documents in order. We? Who is we? You and me, Mom. We're family. What's yours affects me too. Like what? Like the house, for example. If something were to happen to you, I'd have to take care of everything. It's better that we know exactly what there is. There was the real Patricia, the one who had been waiting for me to die to inherit what she believed was hers, the one who had been calculating the value of my life in dollars and cents. And what if I don't want you to take care of anything? What do you mean you don't want me to? I'm your only daughter. Being my daughter doesn't give you an automatic right to anything, Patricia. Of course it does. I'm your legal heir. Ah, how interesting. 5 minutes ago, you were my daughter who came to apologize out of love. Now you're my legal heir coming to claim your rights. Patricia realized she had shown her true colors. She tried to backtrack. That's not it, Mom. I'm just worried about you. If you have important documents, I can help you organize them. Like you helped me on Christmas Eve when your mother-in-law was humiliating me? Enough with that. How long are you going to keep bringing that up? Until you genuinely apologize. Until you acknowledge what you did to me. I am apologizing. No, Patricia, you're offering a token apology because you need something from me. That's very different. Patricia grabbed her purse with sharp movements, clearly furious that her plan hadn't worked. You know what, Mom? You're right. I did come for the papers. Because someone has to be responsible in this family. Because you obviously don't understand any of this stuff. And what is it that I don't understand? Everything. You don't understand how the world works. You don't understand that there are proper ways of doing things. You don't understand that you can't go through life behaving like what, Patricia? Like an uneducated person. There it was again. The contempt she had been hiding behind forced smiles and obligatory visits. Patricia, I want you to leave my house. What? Leave. Now. You can't kick me out. I'm your daughter. Being my daughter doesn't give you the right to mistreat me in my own home. I'm not mistreating you. I'm telling you the truth. The truth is you came here to manipulate me to get some documents. The truth is you humiliated me on Christmas Eve and have no real intention of apologizing. The truth is you only look for me when you need something. Patricia headed for the door but turned back before leaving. You know what? You're right. I only look for you when I need something. And you know why? Because there's nothing else to look for. No interesting conversation. No useful advice. There's nothing you can offer me but problems. Then don't come back. Perfect. And when you're old and sick, don't come crying to me. Don't worry, I won't. Patricia left, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook. Through the window, I saw her get into her car and speed off, tires screeching. I stood in the living room, trembling, but not from fear or sadness. It was the first time in my life I had set clear boundaries with my daughter. The first time I hadn't caved to her manipulation. And for the first time, I felt powerful. That night, I reread Robert's letter. You have the power to decide who deserves to be in your life. Use it. I had already started. After Patricia stormed out, I stood motionless in the living room for several minutes, processing what had just happened. For the first time in decades, I had said no to my daughter. For the first time, I had put my own feelings before her comfort, and it hadn't killed me. For years, I had lived with the constant fear that if I didn't please Patricia, if I wasn't always available to her, she would abandon me completely. But now I realized she had already abandoned me long ago. I had just been too desperate for her love to admit it. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I woke up without immediately checking my phone to see if Patricia had sent a message. I got up at 8 in the morning, not 5 as had been my custom for decades, and made myself a full breakfast: scrambled eggs, hash browns, toast, and real coffee, not the weak instant stuff I bought to save money. As I ate at the dining room table, I couldn't help but notice how quiet and peaceful the house felt. There was no one criticizing my cooking, no one rushing me to finish, no one making me feel like my presence was a nuisance. After breakfast, I took the documents Robert had left in the box and decided to do something I should have done years ago: understand my actual financial situation. The first document was the deed to the apartment in the West Village. According to the paper, it was a 2-bedroom apartment on a beautiful tree-lined street, in one of the classic pre-war buildings that make the neighborhood famous. Robert had bought it in 1998, when prices were still manageable, and had been renting it out ever since. I looked up the address on Google Maps on my old phone. The building looked elegant, well-maintained, surrounded by cafes and boutiques I had only ever seen from the outside. According to price estimates I found online, that apartment was now worth at least $3 million. The second document was even more surprising: the deed to a commercial retail space on a prime street in Soho. The space was leased to an artisan craft shop that paid $15,000 a month in rent. For 5 years, that $15,000 had been automatically deposited into a bank account I didn't even know existed. I did some quick math on a napkin: $15,000 a month for 12 months, for 5 years. $900,000 that had been accumulating while I lived, counting every penny, buying meat on sale, and mending clothes because I couldn't afford new ones. But the biggest shock was the bank statement. The account did indeed have $2.8 million as I had seen, but it wasn't just savings. Robert had been investing in treasury bonds and other low-risk mutual funds. My husband, who I thought only knew about looms and textile machinery, had been growing our money for years. I sat on the bed we had shared for 25 years and cried, not from sadness, but from a strange mix of pride, amazement, and pain. Pride for having been married to such a forward-thinking man. Amazement at discovering I wasn't the poor widow I had believed myself to be for 5 years. And pain at realizing all the time I had wasted feeling inferior, apologizing for existing, and enduring mistreatment because I thought I had no other choice. That afternoon I made a decision. I was going to see the properties Robert had left me. I took the subway downtown to the West Village. The neighborhood was bustling with young professionals, couples walking purebred dogs, and tourists taking pictures. I found the building easily. It was beautiful. A 4-story pre-war gem with wrought iron fire escapes and a recently restored cream-colored facade. In the lobby, an elegant directory showed that apartment 3B was occupied by the Herrera family. I stood across the street for a long time, trying to process that I owned one of those apartments. That while Patricia treated me like a financial burden, I held prime real estate in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city. A uniformed doorman came out of the building and asked if I needed help. "I'm the owner of apartment 3B, I said, and the words sounded strange in my own mouth. "Could you give me some information about my tenants?" The doorman, a kind-faced older man, asked for my ID and checked my name against a list. He then explained that the Herrera family had lived there for 3 years, always paid on time, and were model tenants. "Are you the lady who works with Mr. Gonzalez?" he asked. "Which Mr. Gonzalez?" "The one who manages all the paperwork for the apartment." The leases, the rent collection, the maintenance. A very professional gentleman. I realized Robert had hired a property manager to handle everything without my even knowing. He had been so meticulous, so careful, that even after his death, everything was still running perfectly. From the village, I took the subway to Soho to see the commercial space. The area was packed with tourists and shoppers, but now I walked those cobblestone streets with a completely different perspective. I wasn't just a visitor, I was an owner. The shop was on a busy pedestrian street, a large, well-located space with big display windows showcasing beautiful handmade pottery, textiles, and jewelry. The store looked prosperous, with customers constantly coming and going. I approached the counter where a young woman was helping a foreign couple. "Excuse me," I said when she was free. "Could I speak to the manager?" "That's me," she replied with a smile. "How can I help you?" "I'm Dolores Clark, the owner of the property." The young woman's expression immediately shifted to one of respect and a little nervousness. "Mrs. Clark, it's so nice to finally meet you. I'm Lucia, the manager. We've always dealt with Mr. Gonzalez, but I'm so glad you came to see the shop." She gave me a tour, explaining which products sold best and how the business had grown. It was clear the shop was successful, and my tenants were hard-working, honest people. "Have you thought about renewing the lease?" I asked, not quite sure why the question popped into my head. "Yes, ma'am. In fact, we wanted to talk about that. Business has been great, and we'd like to know if it's possible to extend the lease for another 5 years. We'd even be willing to negotiate a small rent increase." I walked home with my mind buzzing with numbers and possibilities. Not only did I have money in the bank, but I had a stable monthly income that gave me complete financial independence. I could live comfortably off the rent from the properties without ever touching the savings. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't eat leftovers. I left my house and went to a neighborhood restaurant I had always wanted to try but had considered too expensive. I ordered a steak, my favorite meal, which I had only allowed myself on very rare occasions. As I dined alone at a table for two, I thought of all the times Patricia had gone to expensive restaurants with Frank and her mother-in-law, all the times she had talked about her trips and purchases as if I were too poor to understand that lifestyle. It turned out I could afford that lifestyle. I just never knew I had the option. When I got home, my phone showed 3 missed calls from Patricia. She had started calling about an hour after I'd left for dinner. There were also several texts. "Mom, we need to talk. Mom, answer me. Mom, don't be childish. If you don't answer, I'm coming to the house tomorrow." I read the messages without responding. For the first time in my life, I felt no urge to placate Patricia, to reassure her everything was fine, to apologize for upsetting her. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the good wine I'd been saving for a special occasion that never came, and sat in my living room to enjoy the silence. Tomorrow, Patricia would come to my house, probably furious, definitely demanding. She would come expecting to find the same woman who had always given in to her demands, who had always put her needs above her own, but that woman no longer existed. The power Robert had left me wasn't just financial. It was the freedom to choose. And I had chosen to stop being the mother who begs for love, apologizes for existing, and accepts crumbs of affection in exchange for her dignity. I finished my glass of wine and went to sleep in my bed, in my house, with my money in the bank and my properties generating income. For the first time in 5 years, I slept soundly. Patricia arrived at 10 the next morning, just as she had threatened. This time, she wasn't alone. Frank was with her, and behind them walked Carol, wearing an expression of superiority that was all too familiar. I watched them arrive from my bedroom window as I finished getting ready. I had woken up early, had a leisurely breakfast, and put on a dress I'd had in my closet for years, never finding the right occasion to wear it. It was a simple but elegant navy blue dress that made me feel like the woman I truly was, not the shadow I had become. When they rang the bell, I waited a few seconds before opening the door. Patricia stood on the other side with an impatient expression that turned to surprise when she saw me. "You look different," she said, studying me. "Good morning, Patricia. Frank, Carol." I greeted them politely but without my usual warmth. "To what do I owe the visit?" "Mom, we need to talk urgently," Patricia said. pushing past me to enter without waiting for an invitation. The others followed as if it were the most natural thing in the world. But this time, I didn't rush to offer them seats, water, or coffee. I simply stood in the entryway, waiting. "Aren't you going to invite us to sit down?" Frank asked with that condescending smile that had always made me feel small. "That depends on why you're here." Patricia exchanged a look with her husband. They clearly hadn't expected this reception. "We came because we're worried about you," Patricia said, using that sweet tone she reserved for manipulation. "After what happened yesterday, we've been thinking that maybe you need some help." "What kind of help?" "Well," Carol interjected with her authoritative tone, "Patricia told us about your episode yesterday, about how you threw her out of the house for no apparent reason. That kind of behavior can be a symptom of, well, age-related issues." "Age-related issues?" "Yes, Mom," Patricia continued. "We know getting older can be difficult. It can cause confusion, personality changes, difficulty making rational decisions." Frank nodded sagely, as if he were an expert on the subject. "That's why we think it would be for the best if someone more responsible helped you manage your affairs. Someone who better understands the complexities of the modern world." There it was, the real purpose of their visit. They hadn't come to apologize or mend our relationship. They had come to declare me incompetent to handle my own life. "I see," I said with a calmness that surprised them. "And who would this more responsible person be?" "Us, of course," Patricia replied as if it were obvious. "I'm your only daughter. Frank has a background in finance. We could take care of everything. Your accounts, your important papers, decisions about the house." "The house?" "Yes, Mom. This house is far too big for you. It's a waste for you to live here alone. We could sell it, find you something more age-appropriate. A small condo, or better yet, a senior living community where you'd have company and medical care." Carol smiled with satisfaction. "It's the sensible thing to do, Dolores. At your age, it's important to be in a safe, supervised environment." "And what would happen with the money from the sale of the house?" "Obviously, it would be invested wisely," Frank said. "We would make sure you had everything you needed to live comfortably, under your supervision." "Exactly," Patricia confirmed. "That way, you wouldn't have to worry about a thing. We would make all the difficult decisions for you." I looked at the three of them, standing in my living room, planning my future as if I were a piece of furniture to be rearranged. For years, I had been intimidated by their apparent superiority, by their education, by their money, but now I saw them clearly. They were vultures waiting for me to be declared dead to pick over my remains. "You know what?" I said, walking over to the bookshelf where I had stored some of Robert's documents. "I think you're right. I think it's time someone else made the important decisions." Patricia smiled triumphantly. "I'm so glad you see it that way, Mom. I knew you'd understand." I took out the deeds for the West Village apartment and the Soho property, along with the bank statement. I placed them on the coffee table for everyone to see. "But before you take control of my affairs, I think you should know exactly what you'll be taking on." Patricia picked up the deeds with trembling hands. Her eyes went wide as she read. Frank leaned over her shoulder, and his expression shifted from condescension to astonishment. "What? What is this?" Patricia stammered. "Those are the properties your father left me. The apartment in the West Village is currently worth around $3 million and generates $8,000 a month in rent. The retail space in Soho brings in another $15,000 a month." Frank snatched the bank statement from Patricia's hands. When he saw the number, he went pale. $2.8 million, he whispered. "That's right. Turns out your father was much better with money than any of us imagined, myself included." Carol was no longer smiling. In fact, she looked as if she had swallowed something sour. But you live like," Patricia began. "Like what? A poor person?" "Yes. I've lived like that for 5 years because I didn't know I had another choice. But now I do." I sat down in my favorite armchair, the one Patricia had always considered old and ugly, and looked at them with the calm of someone who finally holds all the cards. "So," I continued, "let's talk about your plans to take over my affairs. How exactly do you intend to manage over $6 million in real estate, plus a monthly income of $23,000? Patricia had dropped the papers and sat down heavily on the sofa. Frank was still reading and rereading the statement as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Mom, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't I tell you what? That I wasn't the pathetic, poor widow you thought I was? That I didn't need your pity or your charity? That's not it. Then what is it, Patricia? Why do you think I have age-related issues? Why do you think I need you to make decisions for me? Carol cleared her throat uncomfortably. Well, we didn't know about this. We thought you were in a vulnerable position. No, Carol. You thought I was a nuisance to be managed, a burden to be handled in whatever way was most convenient for you. I stood up and walked over to Patricia, who was still staring at the documents in shock. Do you know the difference between you and me, Patricia? I worked my whole life to build something for my family. I sold my few possessions to pay for your college. I cleaned houses so you could have the opportunities I never had. I sacrificed so you could have a better life. Patricia looked up, tears in her eyes that I couldn't tell were from shame or frustration. You, on the other hand, I continued, have spent years waiting for me to die to inherit what you thought was coming to you. You've come to my house only when you need something. You've humiliated me in front of strangers, and now you come here with a plan to have me declared incompetent and steal what's mine. We didn't want to steal anything. No? Then why didn't you ask me what I wanted? Why did you assume you had the right to decide where I should live, how I should spend my money, what I should do with my life? Frank finally spoke up. Mrs. Clark, we only wanted to help. No, Frank. You wanted to control. There's a very big difference. I walked to the table and gathered all the documents. So here is my decision. Patricia, I'm going to give you one last chance. You can leave my house right now, reflect on the kind of daughter you've been, and if you ever decide you want a real relationship with me, one based on mutual respect, not convenience, you can come back. And if I don't? If you don't, then I will consider that you have chosen not to be a part of my life, and I will act accordingly. What does that mean? I smiled for the first time since they had arrived. It means I have enough money to live very well without you. It means I can write my will however I please. It means I can choose who inherits my estate. Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to panic. You can't disinherit me. I'm your only daughter. I can do whatever I want with my money, Patricia. It's my money. Carol stood up abruptly. Let's go. This conversation is pointless. Frank followed her, clearly uncomfortable. But Patricia remained seated, looking at me as if seeing me for the first time. Are you really going to disinherit me? That's up to you. It depends on whether you can learn to treat me like a person who deserves respect, not an obstacle to be managed. Patricia stood up slowly, picked up her bag, and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned. You're not going to win anything with this, Mom. You're just going to end up alone. Patricia, I said with a sad smile, I've been alone for years. The difference is, now it's by my own choice. Not because you've turned me into a piece of furniture you only notice when it's in the way. They left without another word. I watched from my window as they got into their BMW and disappeared down the street. For the first time in decades, my house felt truly my own. The days following the confrontation with Patricia were the strangest of my life. For the first time in decades, I woke up each morning without the weight of anxiety on my shoulders. There were no urgent messages to answer, no family crises to solve, no one to please but myself. The first week was almost baffling. I was so used to living according to others' needs that I didn't know what to do with so much freedom. I would get up, eat breakfast, and then sit in the living room wondering what I should do with my day. It was on the Wednesday of that first week that I made a decision that would change everything. I walked to the corner bakery, the one that had been there since I moved into the neighborhood 40 years ago. Mrs. Rosa, the owner, had always been kind to me, but our relationship had never gone beyond good morning and the usual. This time, I took the time to really talk to her. Mrs. Rosa, I said as I picked out some pastries. Do you have grandchildren? Her eyes lit up immediately. Oh, Mrs. Clark, I have 5, the most beautiful in the world, though I may be biased. She laughed and started telling me about each one. 12-year-old Sebastian, who was a soccer star, 8-year-old twins, Andrea and Alejandra, who drove her crazy with their mischief, 6-year-old Carlos, who wanted to be a firefighter, and little 4-year-old Valentina, who was the darling of the family. But you know what? She said as she wrapped my pastries. Sometimes I think I enjoy them more now than when I raised my own kids. Back then, I was so worried about doing everything perfectly, making sure they had everything they needed, that I forgot to enjoy the moments. Her words hit me like a lightning bolt. I had raised Patricia with that same desperation, that urgency to be the perfect mother, to give her everything I never had. But in the process, I had forgotten to simply enjoy being her mother. And you, Mrs. Clark? Do you have grandchildren? I have one granddaughter, I replied, but I haven't seen her in a long time. Mrs. Rosa looked at me with that compassionate expression older women give each other when we understand unspoken pains. Oh, these modern families, she sighed. Everyone's so busy, so scattered. But you'll see, family love always finds its way back. I left the bakery with my pastries and an idea I couldn't shake. What if I could have grandchildren too? Real grandchildren, not the ones by blood who saw me as a nuisance, but grandchildren of the heart who would genuinely love me. That afternoon, instead of staying home watching television as I had for the past 5 years, I went for a walk through my neighborhood with completely new eyes. I passed the park where I used to take Patricia as a child, the same park where new generations of children now played. I sat on a bench under the shade of a tree and just watched. There were young mothers pushing swings, grandmothers chasing toddlers through the playground, children sharing popsicles on a warm afternoon. A little girl, about 6 years old, approached my bench. Her hair was in 2 messy pigtails and she had a gap-toothed smile. "Ma'am," she said, "are you somebody's grandma?" The question took me by surprise. Yes, I have a granddaughter. Then why are you here alone? Doesn't your granddaughter want to play with you? From across the park, a young woman came rushing over. "Isabella, what have I told you about talking to strangers?" When she reached us, she apologized profusely. She was a woman in her 30s, clearly exhausted, with that look of a mother who has 1,000 things on her mind. "Don't worry," I said. "We were just chatting. It's just that Isabella is such a talker. She's always asking everyone questions." "My name's not Sophia," the girl protested. "My name's Isabella. Sophia is my stuck-up cousin." The mother laughed. "You're right. I'm sorry. Isabella is my oldest. And I'm Maria," she added, giving me a wink. I laughed, a genuine laugh for the first time in weeks. "I'm Dolores. It's a pleasure to meet you both." Maria sat on the bench with me while Isabella went back to the swings. She told me she was a single mother, that she worked as a secretary in a government office, and that afternoons in the park were her moment of rest after a long day of work and school. "And you? Do you come to the park often?" "No," I admitted. "I haven't been in years, but I think I'm going to start coming more often." For the next hour, Maria and Isabella told me about their lives. Maria spoke of how hard it was to raise 2 girls alone, how she missed having family nearby for support. Isabella asked me if I knew how to do braids, if I liked princesses, and if I wanted to be her friend. When they left, Isabella hugged my legs and said, "Mrs. Dolores, will you come tomorrow? I want you to meet my little sister, Amelia. She's learning to walk and she's very funny." That night, for the first time in years, I went to bed excited about the next day. Over the next 2 weeks, I developed a completely new routine. I would wake up, have a proper breakfast, and then go for a walk. I discovered the public library 3 blocks from my house that I had never visited. I joined the senior book club, where I met Maria Elena, a 70-year-old retired teacher who became my confidant, and Mr. Aurelio, a 75-year-old widower who told the funniest jokes I'd heard in years. I also met Mr. Wang, the owner of the neighborhood Chinese restaurant, who, it turned out, had emigrated from Guangzhou 30 years ago and, like me, had raised children who now only visited when they needed money. We became fast friends, bonded by the shared experience of being parents who had given everything and received little in return. But the most important thing of all was my new friendship with Maria and Isabella, and later with Amelia, Isabella's younger sister who was indeed learning to walk, and who stole my heart the first day I met her. Maria worked until 6 in the evening, so I started picking the girls up from school and taking them to the park until she arrived. It wasn't planned. It just happened naturally when Maria mentioned how hard it was for her to get there on time, and that she worried about leaving the girls with a sitter. I could help you, I offered one day. I live close by. I have nothing to do in the afternoons, and I adore your daughters. Maria looked at me with tears in her eyes. Would you really do that? I don't have anything to pay you with. I don't need payment. I just need a purpose. And just like that, without planning it, I became the adopted grandmother of Isabella and Amelia. The girls started calling me Grandma Lola and telling me all their secrets, their dreams, their fears. Isabella taught me how to play games on her tablet, and I taught her how to make paper flowers. Amelia learned to walk from my hand into my outstretched arms in the same park where Patricia had taken her first steps 35 years ago. Maria became the daughter Patricia had never been, grateful, affectionate, interested in my well-being not for what she could get from me, but out of genuine affection. She told me about her job, asked for my advice on handling the girls' mischief, and invited me over for Sunday dinners. A month after the confrontation with Patricia, I realized I hadn't thought about her for several days in a row, not because I had stopped caring, but because my life was now filled with real love, true purpose, and authentic relationships. One afternoon, while Isabella and I were doing her homework at my dining room table, she looked up from her math notebook and said, "Grandma Lola, why don't you have more grandkids like us?" "What do you mean, sweetie?" "Well, you're the best grandma in the world. It's not fair that only we get your love. There should be more kids who love you like we do." Her words filled my chest with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. This 6-year-old girl understood something my own 35-year-old daughter never had. That love isn't inherited. It's earned. That affection isn't a right. It's a gift given freely and received with gratitude. That night, I checked my bank accounts and the rent deposits from my properties. The numbers were still there. Solid, real, giving me the security of knowing I could live comfortably for the rest of my life without depending on anyone. But more important than financial security was the emotional security I had found. For the first time in decades, I felt loved not out of obligation or convenience, but by choice. Maria, Isabella, and Amelia had chosen to love me, and I had chosen to love them. My phone had not rung once with a call from Patricia. No apologies, no attempts at reconciliation, not even curiosity about how I was. Her silence hurt less than I had expected, because I finally understood that some love isn't worth begging for. I went to sleep that night clutching a card Isabella had made for me at school. It was a drawing of the two of us holding hands, with flowers all around, and words written in the imperfect script of a first grader. "For Grandma Lola, who loves me even though we're not blood family." In those few words, Isabella had summed up the most important lesson of my life. Real family is chosen, not inherited. 6 months after that Christmas Eve that changed my life forever, I find myself sitting on the patio of the cafe on the corner of my block. The same cafe I had considered too expensive for years. It's a Sunday morning. The July sun is warm on my face, and I have a cappuccino in front of me that costs what I used to spend on food for 2 days. But I'm not thinking about the money. I'm watching a woman walk by who didn't recognize me, even though we've lived on the same block for 15 years. She didn't recognize me because I'm not the same person. The Dolores from 6 months ago walked with her head down, her shoulders hunched from the weight of years of unacknowledged sacrifices. She wore old, faded clothes because she didn't consider herself worthy of anything better. She spoke in a quiet voice because she had learned that her opinion didn't matter. The Dolores of today is wearing a new coral-colored dress I bought at a boutique on Madison Avenue, not because it was expensive, but because I liked how it looked on me. My hair, which I used to cut myself in the bathroom mirror, is now styled by Monica, a stylist in the West Village who has become a friend. I walk tall because I finally understand my own worth. This morning, before coming to the cafe, I stopped by my house to check the mail. Among the bills and junk mail, I found a letter that made me smile. A formal invitation to Isabella's 6th grade graduation. Maria had elegant invitations made, as if it were a university ceremony, and in the list of special people Isabella wanted to thank, my name was first. To my Grandma Lola, who taught me that true love doesn't need paperwork. 3 months ago, Maria asked me to be Isabella's official godmother for her graduation. "You've been more present in Isabella's life than her own father," she told me, her eyes full of tears. To us, you're not an adopted grandmother. You're just grandma. The ceremony is next week, and I already have my dress ready. An elegant navy blue one I had made by a local seamstress. A woman who, like me, had spent years being invisible until she decided she deserved better. From my table at the cafe, I watch families walking towards the park. Young parents pushing strollers, grandparents carrying backpacks full of toys, children running ahead with the boundless energy of someone who knows hours of fun await. For years, seeing those scenes filled me with melancholy. They reminded me of what I had lost, of what Patricia had denied me, of the Sunday family gatherings I never had with my granddaughter Sophia. But now, those same scenes fill me with joy because I know that this afternoon I'll be in that park too, not as a lonely spectator, but as part of a family I chose, and that chose me. Isabella and Amelia come to my house every Saturday morning. I teach them to cook the recipes my mother taught me. Pot roast, stuffed bell peppers, sweet cornbread. Isabella has a natural talent for cooking, while Amelia, now 5, prefers to be my official assistant. She fetches ingredients, whisks eggs, and always manages to get flour from head to toe. Maria works on Saturday mornings, so those hours are just for us. We cook, we talk, we do chores, and sometimes we just sit in the living room watching cartoons while eating popsicles. Last month, Isabella asked me something that moved me deeply. Grandma Lola, when I grow up, will I be like you? Will I be strong and brave? Why do you say that, sweetheart? Because my mom says you're the strongest woman she knows. She says you learned to stand up for yourself against people who didn't treat you right. I want to be like that when I grow up. Maria had told Isabella, in terms a child could understand, the story of how I had freed myself from a family that didn't value me. She hadn't given specific details, only explained that sometimes people have to step away from those who hurt them, even if those people are family. Isabella, I told her, strength isn't about walking away from people. It's about knowing your own worth and not letting anyone make you feel you're worth less than you truly are. And how do I know how much I'm worth? You're worth all the love you give, my child. You're worth all the joy you share. You're worth all the times you help someone without expecting anything in return. That conversation made me reflect on how much my perspective had changed in these months. Before, I measured my worth by how much I could give to others, by how many sacrifices I could make, by how much I was willing to endure for love. Now I understand that my worth doesn't depend on what I can give, but on who I am as a person. I haven't heard from Patricia again. My phone log shows her last call was 5.5 months ago. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks of me, if she misses the Sunday dinners I used to make, if she regrets the words she said that Christmas Eve. But those questions no longer keep me up at night. 2 months ago, Mr. Aurelio from the book club told me something that helped put things in perspective. His youngest son, who lives in California, had stopped calling him after an argument about money. Mr. Aurelio had been depressed for weeks until his granddaughter, his eldest son's daughter, told him something very simple. Grandpa, you can't force anyone to love you, but you also can't force yourself to suffer for someone who chose not to love you. The wisdom of a 16-year-old girl summed up in one sentence what had taken me 68 years to learn. Last month, I made an important decision. I hired a lawyer to write my will. Not out of morbidity, but for clarity. I wanted it to be perfectly established that my assets would go to those who had truly been present in my life. The majority of my estate will go to Maria, Isabella, and Amelia to ensure they can attend good schools and have the opportunities I always wanted Patricia to have. A portion will go to Mrs. Rosa from the bakery, who has been like a sister to me all these years without me even realizing it. Another part will go to Mr. Aurelio and Maria Elena, my book club companions who have become my chosen family. For Patricia, I left a letter. Not money, not property, only words that I hope she might one day understand. Daughter, if you are reading this, it's because I have passed away, and you were curious to know what I left you. I am not leaving you material things because I learned that love cannot be bought or inherited. It is earned through daily actions, genuine presence, and mutual respect. I leave you this letter as a final act of motherly love, the truth. You were an ungrateful daughter who turned her mother into an object of convenience. I waited for years for you to change, to remember who raised you and loved you unconditionally, but you never did. I am not writing this with bitterness, but with the hope that one day you will understand that love must go in both directions. I hope that one day you will know how to truly love someone, without conditions, without expectation of return. And I hope that when that happens, that person loves you the same way. I did not wait for you, because I learned that my life had value with or without your presence. I found a family that chose me as I chose them. I found true love in unexpected places. If you ever decide you want to know the woman I became after I was free from being just your mother, go to the park in Park Slope any Sunday afternoon. Look for a woman with silver hair playing with two beautiful girls who call her Grandma Lola. That woman is me, free, happy, and whole, with love, but without expectation. Your mother, Dolores. This afternoon, like every Sunday, Isabella and Amelia will come to my house for our family dinner. Maria will bring dessert. I will have made the main course, and Mr. Aurelio will join us as he has for the last 3 months. We will talk about the week that passed, make plans for the next, and the children will tell us stories that will make us laugh until our cheeks hurt. After dinner, we'll sit in the living room to watch a movie. Isabella will curl up on my left side, Emilia on my right, and Maria will sit in the armchair next to us with a hot cup of tea. Mr. Aurelio will doze off in his recliner as he always does during the boring parts. And I will be there, surrounded by true love, feeling that my life is complete, not because of what I lost, but because of what I chose to gain. To all the women listening to this story who might see themselves in the Dolores I used to be, I want you to know that it is never too late to decide that you are worth more than others tell you. It is never too late to choose your own happiness over the comfort of others. It is never too late to build the family you truly deserve. Have you lived through something similar to what I've shared? Do you know someone who has been in a similar situation? Tell me in the comments. If this story moved something inside you, give it a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the story of one woman who learned to value herself can be the push another one needs to start her own transformation. Until the next story. And remember, you are worth so much more than you've been led to believe.